Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Go ahead and like, share with your friends, and subscribe. From the moment my daughter, Elaine, walked down the aisle with Damien, I felt a chill that I couldn't shake. Everyone else seemed caught up in the joy of the day. The flowers, the music, the laughter, but my heart had this tight, uneasy rhythm. Damien shook my hand, smiled warmly, and said, "Your home is incredible, Mr. Whitman. Surely, one person shouldn't have to manage such a grand place alone." At first, I laughed it off, but then I remembered the countless questions he'd asked during their engagement, questions about my finances, my investments, even the exact layout of the house. I hadn't paid them much mind back then, chalking it up to curiosity, but now, in the quiet aftermath of the wedding, those questions felt pointed and calculated. A week after the ceremony, Damien showed up at my door with a notary in tow. I remember standing there in my slippers, the morning sun cutting across the porch, and my stomach nodding as he started talking about how 2 large homes could be a burden for a single person, implying that I should consider transferring ownership. I forced a smile, asked him to leave the notary for another time, and shut the door, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. That evening, I replayed his every word in my mind, noticing the subtle ways he had complimented my antiques, my investments, and even the history of the property. It wasn't admiration. It was reconnaissance. I needed answers, but I didn't want to confront Elaine or make her wedding into a battlefield. So I confided in my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, a retired teacher who had an uncanny ability to read people. "Damien brought a man with him?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "You know, I saw a van pull up with some official-looking papers. It had a clipboard, and the man was measuring things inside your house." My stomach sank. Someone had been inside my home already. Why would they measure anything? I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. "You tell me," she replied softly, leaving the question hanging like a storm cloud. That night, I sat in my study and powered up my computer. I had avoided snooping before, respecting privacy, but something told me this required vigilance. What I found made my pulse race. Damien had been searching terms like quick property transfer, elderly homeowner legal loopholes, and house appraisal for rapid sale. The search history was meticulous, almost obsessive. My mind went back to our conversations during the engagement, the dinner where he casually asked about property taxes, the weekend he helped me organize my ledger, asking questions that seemed innocent at the time but now felt like groundwork for a heist. I tried to rationalize it at first. Perhaps he was genuinely interested in real estate? Perhaps he had questions for Elaine, to understand what she inherited. But no, it didn't sit right. There was an underlying strategy, a careful mapping of my life. My gut screamed that he wasn't just ambitious, he was predatory. I felt a mixture of anger and fear, a volatile combination that made me restless at night. I began cataloging everything Damien had said, every visit, every friendly inquiry, everything that had seemed like small talk. It formed a pattern, and that pattern was sinister. I decided to call my lawyer Edward, a man I had trusted for years. His voice, calm but firm, carried a weight of reassurance. "Harold, you need to be careful," he said after hearing me recount the events. "From what you're describing, Damien has a history of fraud. He targets widowers and elderly families, gets close, and manipulates them into transferring property." I felt a chill creep down my spine. How could I have been so blind? My daughter loved him, yes, but love blinded her. And now my home, my sanctuary, was at risk. Edward advised me to gather evidence without alerting Damien, to observe without engaging, and to note any inconsistencies in his story. "He's dangerous," Edward said. "Do not underestimate him." I spent the next few days watching Damien under the guise of normal family interactions. He was polite, charming even, always careful to maintain his image. Yet there were cracks. A visit to the library revealed that he had a different last name in some public records, and a casual check of online business registries showed companies that seemed to exist only on paper. Every smile, every handshake, every casual remark now felt like a calculated maneuver. I felt a mixture of dread and resolve, knowing that I had to protect not just my house, but my daughter from the consequences of being entangled with someone so cunning. Even during family dinners, Damien's question struck me as probing. "Harold, what insurance do you carry for emergencies?" he asked, his eyes too steady. "Do you ever consider downsizing?" My blood ran cold. There it was again, the subtle suggestion that my home wasn't mine to keep. Elaine laughed it off, oblivious, and I forced my own laughter, feeling the tension coiling tighter in my chest. That night, I walked through the rooms of my house, running my fingers along the furniture, remembering years of memories embedded in every corner. The thought that someone might try to steal it, piece by piece, left me shaking but determined. I began discreetly questioning friends and neighbors, asking about any unusual behavior Damien might have shown in public or private. Their stories began to stitch together a troubling image. Damien had asked neighbors about my routines, my comings and goings, and even how I stored important documents. It wasn't curiosity, it was reconnaissance. With each revelation, my suspicion hardened into conviction. I wasn't just protecting my property anymore. I was preparing for battle. Late one evening, I sat alone in the living room, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside, and I made a silent vow. Damien would not succeed. I would uncover every deception, every falsehood, and every scheme before it could harm me or my family. I knew I had to be patient, meticulous, and vigilant. And I knew that the journey ahead would test my endurance, my courage, and my ability to outsmart someone who had already proven how cunning he could be. But I also knew that age brought wisdom, and with that wisdom, I would defend what was rightfully mine. The first step was digging deeper into Damien's past, something I had avoided because I didn't want to seem paranoid. But now, fueled by suspicion and a sense of impending danger, I couldn't wait any longer. I started with his public records, checking addresses, business registrations, and even old social media accounts. What I found made my stomach twist. Multiple addresses that didn't exist, businesses that had no actual activity, and social media profiles that seemed constructed to impress rather than reflect reality. His life was a carefully curated illusion, a mask designed to lure people like me into trusting him blindly. I reached out to Edward again, describing the inconsistencies I had uncovered. He was unsurprised. "Harold, this is classic behavior," he said. "Fake addresses, ghost companies, multiple marriages. It's all designed to manipulate families and gain access to property or money. You need proof beyond doubt, and I suggest you connect with previous victims. They often hold the key to understanding the full pattern." Following his advice, I tracked down a few names linked to Damien's previous addresses and marriages. The first call I made was hesitant. I had to convince myself he hadn't found some loophole to make me a fool. But the voice on the other end was firm, relieved even to finally have someone listening. They told stories eerily similar to mine. Flattery, strategic questions, eventual attempts to claim property, and lawsuits that left them emotionally and financially drained. The pattern was unmistakable. Damien married, charmed, probed, and then maneuvered his way into property ownership or financial gain. Every tale reinforced my suspicion that my home, and perhaps even my daughter's future, were in immediate danger. I began documenting everything carefully: dates, conversations, search histories, public records, and personal observations. I even installed discrete cameras in the living room and main hallway, pretending it was for security, when in reality, it was for evidence collection. Within days, the footage confirmed what I feared. Damien was speaking to someone on the phone, mentioning terms like transfer and quick deal, words that froze me in place even as I tried to maintain normalcy around Elaine. I remember the moment clearly, watching him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, muttering about how easy it would be to finalize the arrangement. My heart raced, a mix of fear and adrenaline sharpening every sense. I could hear the calculations behind his calm tone, the rehearsed nature of his plan. It was more than manipulation, it was a strategy executed with precision. I realized then that if I didn't act, I would be complicit in allowing him to succeed. I could no longer rely solely on suspicion. I needed professional intervention. Detective Collins entered my life at Edward's suggestion. The detective's reputation preceded him as a man known for patience and methodical investigation. When I explained Damien's behavior, Collins nodded slowly. "We see this a lot," he said. "People underestimate charm and confidence. But your documentation, the video footage, and the corroboration from previous victims give us a strong foundation. Together, we planned a methodical approach. I would continue to observe, but now under professional guidance, ensuring that any step Damien took could be documented for legal action. One of the most unnerving discoveries came when I examined old phone bills and emails I had been storing. Damien's messages were carefully constructed, polite, almost affectionate. Yet every word carried an undertone of intent. I found emails asking for details about my mortgage, property insurance, and even my solicitor's contact information. It was the roadmap of a heist, and I had stumbled across it before it was executed. My mind spun with disbelief and anger. How could my daughter be so blind to this man's nature? And yet, I knew my role was not to confront Elaine harshly, but to protect her from the consequences of misplaced trust. I decided to confront Damien indirectly. During a casual dinner, I asked about his work and investments, probing gently while observing his reactions. He smiled, deflecting most questions with rehearsed charm. But then he slipped, mentioning a property valuation in terms that didn't match the normal process. I noted every nuance, every hesitation, every lie that surfaced. It was becoming clearer that Damien's plan relied on my ignorance and compliance, and the thought fueled a quiet, simmering rage within me. Connecting with previous victims proved invaluable. One woman, Grace, shared detailed accounts of how Damien had tried to transfer ownership of her late husband's house within months of marriage. Another, Harold, told me about forged documents and a notary who had been part of the deception. Their stories were painful, but they provided insight into Damien's methods. I realized that this was not just about my home. It was a pattern spanning multiple states, multiple families, all exploited with the same meticulous strategy. The discovery of a hidden camera in my living room was the final piece of the puzzle. I had installed cameras myself, but this one was placed where I hadn't. Reviewing the footage, I found Damien admitting, almost casually, to a friend that the plan was to take over my house legally, using charm and manipulation as tools. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Everything, from the engagement questions to the friendly visits, had been staged, rehearsed, and timed to perfection. I felt anger, betrayal, and a fierce protective instinct all at once. I compiled all the evidence. The videos, the search history, the inconsistencies in his background, the testimonies from previous victims, and the documentation of his suspicious behavior. It was a dossier that could withstand scrutiny and potentially prevent him from harming anyone else. I shared it with Detective Collins, who reviewed it carefully. "Harold, this is more than enough," he said. "We can build a case, but you need to stay calm. Damien is clever and he will test boundaries. Do not engage alone. We coordinate every step from here." I nodded, understanding the gravity. The stage was set, but the final act would require patience, precision, and courage. As I waited, I continued to observe, documenting every visit, every phone call, and every subtle attempt at manipulation. Damien was meticulous, but he underestimated one thing: my resolve. Every smile he offered, every polite question, I cataloged mentally and physically, storing them for the day when truth would confront deception. My anger had matured into focus. My fear had transformed into determination. And in that quiet, relentless observation, I realized that not only would I protect my home, but I would also expose Damien's entire network of fraud to the authorities, sparing other families from the pain and loss I was determined to prevent. By the time Detective Collins and I finalized our plan, the house felt different, charged with anticipation, like the calm before a storm. Every room, every hallway, every corner was under surveillance, not just for security, but to catch Damien in the act. Elaine remained blissfully unaware of the depth of her husband's deceit, and I carefully maintained that veil of normalcy to ensure the sting would work. We installed hidden cameras in places Damien wouldn't suspect, monitored entrances, and coordinated with the local police. The notary Damien planned to bring was also being tracked, and Detective Collins assured me that their coordination would catch both of them red-handed. The morning of the operation, I woke early, pacing the living room while reviewing every detail. The thought of Damien arriving, so confident, so charming, filled me with a mix of adrenaline and dread. My hands shook slightly as I adjusted the last camera angle. And yet, beneath the tension, I felt a quiet satisfaction. All the nights of sleepless vigilance, the calls to previous victims, the painstaking documentation, had led to this moment. When Damien arrived, it was exactly as I had predicted. A smug smile, a polite greeting, and that familiar charm that had once fooled so many. He didn't notice the small cameras tucked behind flower vases, or the recording devices hidden in the light fixtures. I played the part of the unsuspecting father perfectly. He brought the notary, a man with a polished demeanor but eyes that betrayed unease. They presented a folder with forged documents, explaining that the house transfer was routine and legally sound. I gestured for them to sit, my voice calm but steady, concealing the storm inside. "Damien, I've reviewed everything," I said, letting my gaze linger on his face, watching for any crack in his composure. He chuckled nervously, assuming I was merely stalling. "Everything?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, "including your search history, previous transactions, and conversations with other families you've targeted." His smile faltered, just slightly, and I knew I had his attention. Detective Collins and his team moved quietly, observing from hidden positions, ready to intervene at the precise moment. I continued, "I've spoken to people who know your methods. I've documented your attempts to manipulate families into transferring property. And I've captured your intentions on tape, Damien. Every word, every plan, every deceitful step." The color drained from his face as he realized that charm alone would not save him this time. The notary's calm veneer cracked, revealing panic as he glanced at Damien, silently questioning whether this plan had been compromised. Damien tried to protest, to maintain control of the narrative, but every argument he offered was anticipated and countered with evidence. I presented the footage, the documents, and the testimonies from previous victims. "You may have fooled others," I said, my voice steady, "but you underestimated me. And now your scheme ends here." It was strange my fear had vanished, replaced with clarity and resolve. For the first time, I felt the full weight of control in my hands, not in the chaos Damien had tried to create. Within minutes, police officers moved in, quietly but efficiently, detaining Damien and the notary. The look on Damien's face was one of disbelief, a mixture of rage and humiliation as he realized his carefully orchestrated plan had crumbled before it began. The notary, once composed, now stammered, attempting to explain himself, but the evidence was irrefutable. Everything Damien had worked for, the manipulations, the charm, the lies, it was all captured, all documented, and now in the hands of the authorities. After the arrest, I sat with Elaine in the living room, letting the silence speak for a moment before breaking it gently. "Elaine," I said, "I know you didn't see this coming. But Damien was never who he appeared to be. This is not your fault." She buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly, and I held her, letting her grief pass. "I forgive you for trusting him," I whispered. "But we'll move forward stronger and wiser. This house and our family will remain safe." The court case moved quickly. Damien was found guilty of fraud, property manipulation, and multiple counts of deception, receiving a 12-year prison sentence. The notary received 5 years for aiding and abetting in the fraud. Elaine, heartbroken but relieved, filed for divorce, severing ties with the man who had nearly destroyed us. She expressed remorse, tears staining her cheeks, for bringing him into our lives, and I forgave her with all my heart. It was important to me that she learned the lesson without carrying the weight of guilt unnecessarily. In the aftermath, our neighborhood and friends praised the vigilance and courage it took to uncover Damien's plot. I became a resource for other families, advising on elder fraud, property protection, and how to spot manipulative behavior masked as charm. The experience left me stronger, more alert, and determined to help others avoid the same trap. I realized that age doesn't just bring wisdom, it brings the ability to act decisively when deception threatens the life you've built. Looking back, I remember the nights of sleepless planning, the anxiety that gnawed at my chest, and the fear that Damien would succeed. But I also remember the clarity of purpose, the support of Edward and Detective Collins, and the courage that grew from knowing that inaction would cost far more than effort. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, had been worth it to see justice served. Damien's arrest was not just about protecting my home. It was about preventing a predator from harming countless others. I often sit in my living room now, watching Elaine smile again, the house filled with warmth and life rather than fear and tension. The experience taught me that vigilance, combined with patience and courage, can outmatch even the most calculated deception. I am proud that I protected what was mine, guided my daughter through the fallout, and prevented a criminal from continuing his spree. This house, these memories, our family, they remain intact because we refuse to be victims. To anyone watching this story, know that deception often comes wrapped in charm and confidence. Trust your ends. Let fear stop you from acting. I urge you to learn from our experience, to protect yourself and your loved ones, and to recognize that wisdom and determination are powerful allies, especially in the face of cunning manipulation. And remember, courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet, steadfast vigilance that saves what matters most. Moral lesson. Life teaches us in unexpected ways that wisdom is not just knowledge, it is the ability to act when deception threatens what we hold dear. Age brings not only experience, but also a heightened sense of discernment, a quiet power to see through charm and lies. Our story shows that vigilance, patience, and careful observation can prevent manipulation from taking root. We must trust our instincts and seek guidance when suspicion arises, gathering evidence calmly and acting decisively. Forgiveness is also vital, knowing that loved ones can err. Even when deceived, allows healing to flourish. Protecting your home, your family, and your peace of mind is not selfish. It is a moral responsibility that strengthens resilience and nurtures trust. Every act of careful planning, every conversation with the right people, and every moment of courage contributes to a future where justice prevails. Deception thrives in silence, but truth and determination are unstoppable when applied with clarity. Let this story encourage you to remain alert, to act when necessary, and to use life's lessons to empower others. Protect what matters, learn from missteps, and let wisdom guide every step, proving that patience and resolve are the ultimate tools of triumph. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends, and comment your perspectives or the key lessons you've learned.